This evening's focus topic is on maze solving and recent stuff that Duncan was doing. He started to talk about it a bit at Minos. He has a natty interactive model that he can show us. So I won't steal your thunder anymore, Duncan, but I will hand over to you for the focus topic on maze solving and simulation.
Okay, well, this is me. I'm Duncan, and I'm going to try and present now and see if I can get the right thing up on the screen. My plan is not to repeat all the details I did at Minos unless somebody wants me to. So there's a couple of people who weren't there at Minos, so I can go through, if everybody else is prepared to be bored for a bit, I can go through the basics again, or I can miss them out. Somebody say something.
I think you could probably go through it again. I don't think anyone's going to object to getting their memory refreshed about what you said at Minos. Anybody objecting? No? Okay.
Okay, so we've got loads of time. So please ask the questions as they come up. Let's make it as interactive as we can. Right. So this is pretty much what you see. I've preloaded maze information from APEC 1988. Now you can see roughly, this is a representation of the maze. You can see there's walls around the outside, and there's the yellow splodge with an arrow at the top is the mouse. And you can see that the three walls of the start square are there, and that's all we know. The T represents my target cell. Okay. Now the way the solver works is via a queue. So before I start, I put the address, the northing and easting of the target cell into a queue. And all I do is take the next thing out of the queue and see whether the four walls next to that cell are present. And if they're not present, I put those walls back into the queue. So if I can remember how to do this, that, you see the S's. So I've taken the cell with a T in it out of the queue, and I have put those four cells back into the queue. I've now got four things in the queue. Okay. And I keep doing that. Now you'll see that if I do it again, you'll see that the S's are from the cell that was to the north of the original T cell. So I put the cell to the north into the queue first. The other thing I do is I don't put cells into the queue that have already been through the queue, the ones I've marked as S for solved. Okay? So as I keep taking things out of this queue and putting more things into the queue, you can see you get the standard pattern that grows out from the middle. And there's no rules to stop me putting things in the queue, so I just keep on going. That's probably a bit boring. I'm going to have to look at my crib sheet here. So if I do, this might do it. I'm going to run the solver all the way to the mouse. And when it reaches the mouse, it knows that the cell that it reaches the mouse from is one on A shortest route to the center. Okay? And it can move the mouse to that cell. And there it has, it's done it. You can see in this case, I've had to solve the entire maze, and I've moved the mouse forward one cell, and I've found one more wall to the east of the mouse. Okay? And I can keep doing that, and it will keep finding more bits. Now the S's are things that have been through the queues. And you're starting to see there's bits of the maze to the bottom left-hand corner where they're not getting in the queue anymore, they don't have to. So the nearer I get to the center at the moment, the fewer cells I have to process through the queue and the faster I can go. So I'm going to go all the way to the center. So you can see as it goes along, there are times when it's not solving much of the maze at all, only the bit between where it is and the center. And I wish my mouse would run as fast as this when it's solving. Okay. So there we go. I found the center. And obviously the next thing to do is to move the target back to the start. So I've moved the T back to the start. Now you'll notice that the asterisks, which have been put in everywhere that the mouse has visited. So when it visits a cell, it puts a flag in there, and that means I draw up an asterisk on the map. Now the cell with a T in, that asterisk is coloured green. And I've marked that as not only visited, but also found. That which means that I know the route, I know the shortest route from that cell to the target. So when I take a cell out of the queue, I can check to see whether that cell was found or not. And if it was found, I can then carry forward that found status to the cell that the mouse is coming from, okay, or the next cell. So I can carry forward founds through all the cells that I've visited as I'm doing the solve. Okay, and if I do one step of the solver now, you'll see that quite a lot of the left-hand corner has been coloured green. And from each of those green cells, I know a shortest route back to the start. Does that make sense? Lots of confused faces. Pete's mouthing something, but his microphone is silenced. You're still silenced, Pete.
Yeah, my wife does as much the same to me, really. The green means that you have a route from the green cell back to the start at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And that's just processed through the queue in the same way. So now, instead of searching all the way back to the target cell, I can search towards the target cell, but stop when I find a found cell. Okay? And it's off having a look at other bits of the maze, looking for the shortest route in the normal way. Does that work okay on your videos? So you can see where it stopped. It stopped in the cell where it knows a shortest route from that cell back to the target. So it doesn't seem much point following that shortest route all the way back to the target. And this is what this is the change I made after Pete pointed out that I shouldn't really go back to the start cell if I can help it, because in Japan you're only allowed to go back 5 times or something.
That's not quite what I meant, but yes.
Okay.
Well, let me explain. The reason to not go back to the start cell is about the number of runs. What interests me at the moment, though, is the green cells are cells for which you know a route back to the start.
Yeah.
When you do this reverse search, having found the goal, inevitably for everybody, the route taken by the robot whilst it's doing that is different to the route it took on the way out.
Yes.
So you discover new cells. What interests me at this exact point in your animation is that from where the mouse is now, it has found a cell for which it knows there is a route. I'm just wondering if it's possible if at that point there may be a better route through cells that it has not yet seen.
There's a better route from the target cell to the start.
Oh yeah, but that's from where the mouse is. So anyway, sorry, I shouldn't really interfere.
What you can find is that there is another route that is just as short, but there won't be a shorter one.
Okay.
Come back to that later. So there's no point going back to the start. I can set my target back to the middle, and I can solve towards the middle until I find another found cell. Okay, so I'm now on a cell where I know the shortest route, or a shortest route, to the middle. And if I set the target back to the start, I can search for another found cell. And I found a found cell after moving only one cell. So where I am now, I know a shortest route to the start and a shortest route to the finish. So there's nothing more I can do now. At this point, I'm either going to have to go to the start or the finish and start searching from there. Well, because I don't want to go to the start, I'll go to the finish. So I'm going to move all the way back to the finish, actually not necessarily along cells that I've visited before, because it made a little detour there to make sure there wasn't a wall in the way. All right, so now I can again set the target to the start and search back for another found cell, and it sets off in a completely different direction. And it's found a found cell. And now I set the target back to the middle and set off again searching. But all during this time, I'm tending to solve quite a lot less than the whole maze, because I'm not having to work in over the whole maze, if you see what I mean. So now I've got a found path to the middle. Check to see if I've got a found path to the start, and I have. So I now go to the middle. And again, I go set the target to the start and search for a found cell. I've only moved one cell, so I know I've now got a shortest route from the target to, sorry, the center to the start. Okay? I go back to the target just in case. And now I can search all the way back to the start. Now, while I'm doing this, every time I do a search, I stick into a buffer a coded form of the movements the mouse has made. So every time it does a left or right turn, it marks into this list a left or right turn. And when it does a forwards run of a number of cells, it stores a forwards and that number of cells. Okay? So now I can replay that list at high speed, and that's my first high speed run. Okay? Now for this maze, that is a shortest path. But there are some nasty mazes where it won't be. Because when the mouse is searching, it will search for a shortest route, but it won't necessarily search on the cells that it has been to. So sometimes for some cells, there will be a path through cells that it hasn't visited and doesn't know about, which is as short as the path that it's trying to follow. And given the different search strategies, it will sometimes go down those. So although this is a pretty fast route, it's not guaranteed to be the fastest route. So I search back to the start. Sorry, search back to the start. Again, storing all the moves and so on, ready to replay at high speed.
What's the difference between this search back to the start and the previous search back to the start?
If in the previous search back to the start, it went through some cells it hadn't been through before, it might have found some more walls to block off that route. But for this maze, those two searches are identical. I'll show you a different maze in a minute. So now I do my first proper high-speed run that I'm pretty confident will be a shortest path. Okay, right. I'll take questions there, and then I'll go and look at the maze that causes some grief.
Duncan, can you give us a view on your data storage? So how do you map the maze? Are you keeping a found marker in each cell, so a found to the center and a found to the start? Do you keep a marker like that? What kind of data structures are you using for this?
So the first thing I do for the maze, I hold a 17 by 17 array of bytes. So each cell has got 1 byte. 2 bits of that byte are the south and the west walls for that byte, for that cell. And this is why I do a 17 by 17 array, so that I only hold those walls in one place. I was a bit scared about holding the north wall for this cell is the south wall for that cell, and how do you keep them in synchronism and so on. So I only hold a wall in one place. So if I want to look at the north wall, I have to go to the next cell north and look at its south wall. Yeah? And that's why I need a 17 by 17 array. So that's 2 of my bits in each byte. Another bit is the solved bit. Another bit is the visited bit. And the other bit is the found bit. So I'm using 5 bits of my byte in a 17 by 17 array.
Sorry, can you just tell me what the bits were again?
Yeah, okay. So there's the south wall and the west wall. There's the solved bit. There's the visited bit. And there's the found bit.
What's the difference between solved and found, Duncan?
Okay, solved means it's being put into the queue just once, right? So when I'm filling the queue, as I put it in the queue, I set the solved bit. Before I start the solver, I clear all the solved bits. And then as I put something in the queue, I set its solved bit. And if the solved bit was set, I don't put it in the queue again.
So a synonym might be examined or something like that.
Something like that. Queued is actually what it means, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Visited, but the difference is that solved bits are cleared before every solve. Visited bits are cleared before you start the maze and are never cleared after that. They're only ever set. And the same with, no, hang on, found. What do I do with found? Found are cleared before each solved. Each solve.
Found means what?
The first cell that you put into the queue is marked as found. Okay? Whenever you put another cell into the queue, if the cell it's coming from has been found, and the cell it's going to has been visited, you can mark it as found. So it's impossible to have a found cell that hasn't been visited. You're still looking slightly puzzled, Ian.
Yeah, it's my natural state, Duncan. Okay.
I'm not sure I can explain it much better. Let me clear this maze and see if I can explain it better. Let's go through a few. That's not what I wanted to do. Right. Okay, so when I do a solve at the moment, because all the 4 cells next to the target have not been visited, found can't go anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to have to go all the way to the target before I can start talking about it. Okay, now you'll notice that the target cell now has suddenly got a green asterisk. It's got an asterisk because it's been visited, and it's gone green because it's been found, because it's the target. The target is always found if it's been visited. Okay? So if I set the target back to the start, you see the start cell, bottom left-hand corner, is green.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to do a solve. I'm going to do one bit of a solve. Okay, now you see that the cell north of the target cell was put into the queue. The cell north of that was taken out the queue. It was the only one in the queue because there were walls in the way for everywhere else. And that's also marked as found because the cell it's coming from has been found and the cell that it's going to has been visited. Okay?
Yeah.
So I can do that a few more times.
Yeah.
Now you see here I took 2 things out the queue because there were 2 spaces with no wall in the way. Right, and you see those found cells propagating through.
Yeah.
Keep going a bit. Right, we've got a couple on the left-hand side now that have been solved but not found because they've never been visited. So I don't know what a shortest route is back from those cells.
Oh, so the found implies you have a route from that cell to
Yes.
the target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found a route from that cell.
Ah,
And solved means you've looked at it and assessed it, basically.
Yes, solved means it's been through the queue.
Yeah. Got it now.
Okay.
Yeah, got it now.
Now, the other 3 bits, if I ever choose to use them, I can use for a count. And as somebody said, Wayne, I think it was, said at a Minos many years ago, you only need a couple of bits of count and it'll do everything you need it to do.
I'm not convinced he's correct. I've tried it.
All right, yeah.
I'm not convinced it always works, but
Okay. So, everybody happy about found cells now?
yeah. If you've got 2 bits left over, you instead of a count, you could put a direction. You only need 2 bits for a direction. You could store a direction to what you consider to be the best way from there.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know what the best way was. I'd only know the way I'd come.
You do, because you're starting at the target and working back.
Yeah.
So from any cell, so let's say you're starting at the target, and as you go through the whole thing, the cell 01, the cell just to the north of the target, the direction that would go in there is south. And the cell above that would have a south. And the cell to the right of that would have a west, and the cell to the north of that would have a south, and so on.
Yeah, but where you have a cell that can be approached from 2 different directions, the direction you're coming from depends on the order in which you put cells into the queue.
Yeah, it all depends. It depends entirely on how you process your queue. But nonetheless, all of the arrows will always point downhill towards your target.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Mouse X does. That's how its solver works, and it ends up with a map of 2 bits in those places with arrows pointing the way to go.
Right. Surely you'd have a problem that the way to go can alter as you search different parts of the maze?
Yes, it can. Yeah, and then you change it. That's
Every
the
time
point.
you run this algorithm, you only examine each cell once, and so you only ever get to change the arrows once. It works out.
You see, with my solver, there can be big areas of the maze that never go through the queue again.
Oh, that's fine. You haven't been there. You're not going to go there.
They're places I have been.
Yeah, but you're not. They're not. They're places which, by implication, you have no intention of visiting again.
I don't think that's true.
Okay.
If we look at this next horrible maze, which the fiendish Japanese created, let's go and get it. Just a minute. It's All Japan 003 1982. These mazes, by the way, are courtesy of Pete, so they're text files. The only thing I've done to them is possibly add the names of the files to the end. So when I read them in, I can put the names at the top of the maze. Okay. So let's do this for real. I'm going to press the R button, which is pretty much what would happen in the real mouse. So it'll just plow on through. Okay. So none of these are found yet, obviously. Okay, so it's found the center once. It's searching back for a found cell. Now it's searching back to the middle again. Back to the start. Now it's going to the middle. Now it's searching to the start. It's found a shortest route, and it's going back. Now watch what the mouse does as it approaches the left-hand side. It's found a short route that's all down green cells, but it's making a choice there not to go to a green cell, okay? Because there was another route that could have been there that it hadn't visited, and the strategy I selected went that way. Now, when I do my fast run, which remember is replaying all the moves that this has just done, it does an extra bit. Yeah? Does a total of 64 cells. It's done a funny thing.
Yeah.
Now, when I search back to the start, because it's now been into those cells, it doesn't make that mistake again. And now when I do my real fast run, it does a real fast run. Okay? There's a whole load of that maze that I haven't really been to. And there's bits of that maze that I have visited that I've only visited once and decided it really wasn't worth going there. Now, I ought to, at this stage, explain my strategy stuff again. Because if I change the strategy, this maze becomes completely different. Now, my strategy is what order do I put cells into the queue when I evaluate around a cell. So I'm going to clear this, get a vague memory of where the blue squares are in this at the moment. This is the fast route. Get a vague memory. It's 54 cells. Oh, hang on. We might have a problem. Okay. Start again. Right. when I take a cell out of the solver, I'm putting those 4 adjacent cells in the order north, east, south, and then west. So I take the north, the north of those 4 cells is the one at the front of the queue now, and that's the first one to come out, and so on. And then it, right, so it's always choosing to go north first. And that means it will arrive at the mouse from a particular direction. I've got about 8 strategies. I can start with north, I can start with east, I can start with south, and I can start with west and go clockwise each time. Or I can do west, east, north, south, or I can do north, south, west, east. Okay. Sorry?
Can I propose another one for you, which might fix part of your problem?
Yeah.
Ahead, left, right.
Ahead, left, right. Yeah, I think that's my strategy 7, which favours going straight.
Yeah.
And strategy 8, which favours a turn. Okay. So if I change my strategy to strategy 2, which puts the east one in first, then if I remember this correctly, it then changes everything. So I'm going to reset everything and run it again. So it's now doing its search back to the start, and it's going in completely the opposite direction.
So this is the search back in preparation for a speed run, so it's recording it.
Yeah. Actually, it always records it. It doesn't know if it's in preparation for a speed run or not. It just always records it.
Okay.
So now if I do my speed run, it's completely different. It's still 54 cells though.
Yeah, it's the same length.
Yeah. But it's avoided that jiggly bit that messed me up the first time out.
Is that deliberate, or is there a... Because what you need is a tactic to decide which of these strategies you want to use. How do you decide which one it should use on a particular maze?
Yeah, well, the best way that I know is to steal a copy of the maze the day before and run the solver on it with all possible strategies.
Not to
You know,
that.
it's traditional in the UK to not have a maze until somebody's actually made it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know of a way of doing it. There's too much data there for me to analyse it.
All of my experiments indicate that the minute you've picked the best strategy, the very next maze you come along would have been better with a different one.
Yeah.
So if I pick 2 obvious different ways of doing things, and then I run, because I've got all of those maze files, right? So I run my maze solver in simulation against all of them, and then get it to kind of list the scores and find out who does best. And generally speaking, half of them do better with A and half of them do better than B. It's almost not worth trying to game the thing out. And in the case of the example that you had just now, where I keep trying to want to point to the screen to show you that in the case where you did that little detour on the way back, and then were compelled to do that as a speed run, under the preceding rules, that would have been not great. Under the existing rules, it doesn't really matter, because once it's shaken that out of its system, its third run, its second speed run, won't do that again. And so it will continue to improve each time.
Yeah. I mean, the trouble is, you've got to do that search anyway, right?
Yeah.
If your strategy is that, there could be a route there, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see from the maze that you're showing on there now that you have unexplored cells, with this very inviting looking possible shortcut up that left-hand side. And you need to go and have a look.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty much all I've got prepared to say. I've got some more technical information if you want it. The previous maze, the APEC 1988 maze, the mouse is ready for its first fast run after searching 434 cells, at an average of just over 3.5 cells per second. That's including all the printing. If you take all the printing out, you save something like 30% of the time.
What's it running on to run at that
This
speed?
is an ARM M0 Plus at 48 megahertz. It's an STM32F072.
Written in
Fourth, of course.
Fourth, yeah.
What other languages are there?
Gently, boy.
Okay.
Right. In fourth, it's less than 16 kilobytes of flash, plus the fourth nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
If you use my data structures, you need 289 bytes for the maze and 64 elements maximum for the queue, and you can put that in as 64 bytes if you pack northing and easting into 1 byte.
Have you tested the queue length?
Yeah, the maximum is 32 elements. Yeah, it's when you got a blank maze, that's when you put most things at the same time into the queue, and it's 2 stripes across 16 each. You know, it's like two of these.
I'm pretty sure it's 32. I haven't bothered to prove it, but I'm pretty certain that 32 is the maximal length of queue for a classic.
32 is the maximum, but I always put 64 just in case.
Yeah. There is one way you could avoid having to have the extra cells on the edge, the 17, because of the way the maze is constructed. If you wrap the index round, if you look off the top and it goes to the bottom, there's always a wall there because it's the edge of the maze. So you can look at the wall at the bottom as your wall, as opposed to looking into the next square. So if you look beyond the top, you actually look into the bottom row for your south-facing wall.
Yeah, but if you look at the third cell across on this maze,
from the start,
there's no west wall.
No, what Derek's implying is that if you're using a single byte as an index into the array, it naturally wraps round, right? So the index. So if you add 16 to get to the next column or row, depending on which way you've stored it, you get to the right place. But if that happens to be at one of the borders, so let's say you're at the very top border of the maze. And say you've arranged things so that is index 15. When you add 1 to that, you end up 1 down. Or you can wrap around the 16s. But no, I think the storing the 17 by 17 is classic Duncan thinking outside the box, literally. Again, it never occurred to me to store extra cells around the side because I always wanted to have that nice, neat 256 byte data structure.
I did try once, way back in the Pick 1 days, Derek, store just walls in a 17 by 17. So as you visit a cell, you construct the cell walls from the fact that it's a 17 by 17 array of walls. But with Pick 1, that meant it spent most of its time sitting in the square, assembling its cells to solve itself. So it was just to prove to be quite elegant, but very slow.
Yeah, and Pick 1, in fact, does an awful lot of this sort of thing, where you try and reduce the the amount that it's actually where you try and reduce the amount of processing. So you'll see that when it runs, it literally pauses less as it gets to the middle, because it doesn't. It only processes the route to the middle and ignores the rest of it.
Yeah.
I think the point about the storage is you can do the whole solver in a kilobyte.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is, I'm thinking UKMARS bot. I don't know how you get about 3 kilobytes of RAM or something in that. It's not a lot.
2
kilobytes, yeah.
2, but there's also
you got your
some
stack and all sorts of other things to worry about.
Yeah.
But you should be able to do it in at most 544 bytes. So if you're keeping costs, right? If you're storing costs, which I do, then you need 2 256 byte arrays, 32 bytes for the queue, which could be on the stack if you wish. So that would be 544. So it shouldn't be a big deal. And if you don't, it's just easier for me, at least. It's easier for me to store a cost for each cell and calculate it. Because I lack fourth skills. I would never come up with an alternative.
Yeah, there are lots of ways of doing it. The one in Mouse X only uses 256 bytes for the whole lot, or plus a queue, so another 32. It can be done in that. And that's doing a
bot could do it in that as well. I mean, these all these strategies were kind of dreamt up in the days of the 8051, when people would kill for an extra few bytes of RAM. And to find ourselves in 2020 with the AVR processor and a mere 2K of RAM feels very retro. But it's I say it's doable. I'm in the middle of rewriting the code. I will let you know.
How much flash do you get on the Nano?
Is it
32?
I think you get 1K.
32K.
But yeah.
32K.
Yeah.
Oh, well, 32K would give you plenty big enough fourth, and you could do the whole thing. There's no problem about getting it into the space.
Oh, there's no problem anyway. I don't think. So even with my tendency to overcomplicate stuff, my current firmware build for UKMARS bot is about 23K. But that's got loads of stuff. That's got menus and command line interpreter and no end of useless things which don't need to be there.
Yeah.
But my command line interpreter comes free.
No, it doesn't. It's part of the system that gets loaded on the chip. It's only because you didn't write it.
Yeah, I didn't write it, but the actual overhead for a command line interpreter, I think, is maybe, I don't know, 64 bytes or something.
Yeah,
it is negligible. It's free.
Sure. What I mean is, I've got my commands are strings, right? So there's a whole pile of strings that get stored, and all that just adds up.
It's the flash isn't the issue, is it? The flash is not an issue.
No.
The RAM is tighter. Okay.